Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, although finding myself within an environment my personal self was unfamiliar with, impressions would reveal that I had been frequenting what presented as a kind of yoga class for a duration, although in recent moments I had missed several sessions for whatever reason this may be, and now was re-establishing myself with the class. As we each are multi-dimensional, what expresses throughout the dimensions of creation and our various body aspects and vehicles will not all be made apparent to the personal self, as realistically there would be far too much by way of experience that could ever be revealed. We are afforded then but glimpses, pieces of the full magnitude of our multi-dimensional activities, all of which are present in the nowness of the isness. The real awareness that we each actually are, that is the all is true reality, will be animating through all consciousness-affected body forms, vehicles, aspects, and their respective environments, dimensional positions, and activities. As I mentioned, it is the personal self that is rather limited, where full realization of the scope and range of our multi-dimensional experiences are concerned, and what is unveiled to the personal self will generally be that which makes the most sense, awareness speaking, to be shown. That as we find ourselves in real side situations, where from the personal self perspective, this is something we haven't experienced before, but that we have a sense of having indeed experienced what is transpiring, this will invariably be our tapping into the real awareness oversight of our true beingness, accessing the everything that is taking place creationally, despite the personal self only just receiving the experience for seemingly the first time. As I mentioned, I had in actuality been attending regular classes, a little along similar representational lines as what I shared and described as the real side dojo, a martial arts training, that although would appear as it was literally presented as, was in reality representing the ongoing process of awareness, that of refining the personal self and focus to align with the real intent of all is recognition. And just as it had been with the martial arts training, where the teacher would in fact be a real guide, this yoga class would be conducted by a human female that impressions revealed was either a real guide or an individual that possessed of extreme awareness. I would suggest the likelihood that it was either, but this I could not determine with certainty, or that impressions would confirm. As I also alluded to, I had been attending these yoga sessions consistently, but in recent moments had not been doing so. But evidently, as the class did seem to represent the awareness process, imperative was it not to be skipping lessons, so to speak, hence my returning now to the class. Life is always moving into greater positions of self-recognition, and as the true reality shines through creation, and the opportunity to get on board with it, so to say, is made available, important is it to keep up with the all is, or we somewhat miss the boat in a manner of speaking. And here, in the real side yoga class, I had fallen somewhat behind the other students, who logically would then be those on their own respective awareness processes, and necessary was it for me to catch up, as they would be performing moves, poises, and poses beyond my ability to fathom and replicate. I refer to it as a yoga class, but this was simply the best reference applicable, as what was taking place was really the vague semblance of yoga-style poses of a nature far beyond my ability to literally express. But as I mentioned, the overall gist was representational of the awareness process, and I was soon re-established and up to speed with the position in life all the other students had assumed. There came a moment where the room we were in would be darkened, and as we each stood with our eyes shut, we had something applied to the right ear that through sheer force of will, or rather intent, so this object was retained in the position that it was for a duration, which in some way facilitated our awareness processes as impressions revealed, perhaps again not literally as it appeared, but more symbolic, that as the left tends indicate the past, the right the future, maybe we were lending an ear to that which was beneficial, as opposed to the distractions and outdated, restricting ideas we have previously known. When this activity was complete, to the satisfaction of the teacher, so we each were provided a beverage. I would approximate it to a mild coffee latte, taste and consistency wise. The teacher did seem somewhat blunt and direct with me, as though I had worn her patience a little thin, due to my periods of absence from the class. I have found this is fairly consistent in regards to my dealings with the guides on the real side, that they will cater the process they are taking each individual through according to the unique way we each have developed the personal self-consciousness. With myself, it has been determined that the guides have to periodically reel me back in, so to speak, give me an occasional symbolic clip around the ear, all for my benefit and focus, or I have a tendency to go off the real side tracks and along various tangents before I re-establish a focus and intent again with the real purpose, that of his recognition, as opposed to being over-captivated by other dimensional phenomena. I am reminded of real side experiences as shared by Eric Gamer, where DUANE and the guides are beating the proverbial excrement out of him. Symbolically, they are attempting to purge him of the restricting and limiting ideas he is retaining attachment to redirect his focus, etc. As I mentioned, the guide orchestrating the yoga classes deemed it more prudent to operate strictly where I was concerned, as opposed to overindulging and spoiling the child, not sparing the rod, as the saying goes. Regardless, we all were seated now, and my attention was drawn to one of the students, a boy of the approximate age of 10, I would suggest, but an individual that impressions revealed was very gifted, and although presenting as human externally, he was of an altogether alternative species. He would seem to be lost in his own little world, talking to himself continuously, to the bewilderment of all present, as they couldn't fathom what he was saying, and his words were rather than dismissed as nonsensical. However, impressions revealed he was unveiling that which those present were as yet unaware of, applying references as best as he was able by way of explanation. And as I determined this, and listened intently, I could recognize a certain proportion of that which he spoke of, but although it made sense during the experience, I failed to pull it back through to the physical on waking, and unable then to articulate what he expressed. Although, where such occurs, generally it formulates itself over time and becomes known to us, weaving into subsequent real-side experiences, where we receive visual clarification of that which we were previously unable to draw into the personal self, and apply literal reference to. The boy would momentarily snap out of his trance-like state, as though he had been accessing the information he had been revealing in this self-induced hypnotic manner, and now he would randomly identify certain individuals of the group who, although appeared outwardly as human, were in fact anything but, just as was the case with himself. All present were sincere in regards to their focus with the all-ears. The alien attendees just had a preference to operate as humans seemingly. Very possibly their positions were more precarious. Anonymity and the obfuscation of their actual body types was advisable to assure their safety. That although identified as non-humans, they were not exposed, as they retained their outer human forms. The yoga class presented as a safe haven, but the dark forces always are watching, and certainly listening to the Skypes, and our recounting of that which we experience on the real side. And so certain safety methods are generally employed, certain details omitted, etc., to assure the protection of those going through their awareness processes who are in more precarious circumstances. Present also were curious, spider-like creatures in association with the alien boy, but that which didn't present as hostile, they simply scuttled about the room as though assigned to him, a feature of the boy's actual species, along the reference lines of a magician's familiar. The gifted boy and his spider affiliates would fade from the room, as though he had business to attend to elsewhere, and now there would be another unexpected addition to the proceedings. For entering our midst would be initially what appeared to be a large ball of fire that circled the ceiling, and as moments passed, it would reformulate into a more identifiable body type, that of a large dragon creature wreathed in flame, though a fire of a purple hue. All the students would descend into a panic. Of the teacher, the guide, there seemed no sign, as though she had departed also, the yoga session having been completed, but I would have the impressions that this dragon was seeking a particular individual of the class, and that its intentions were benign. I would find myself at one stage isolated from the other students, the dragon turning its attentions immediately upon me, and the realization that it was myself that it sought. The dragon would descend and somewhat engulf me in the purple flame that surrounded its body, and the curious sensation of myself becoming one with it, as though a meshing of body types, and where the result was a single form, one that was more humanoid than dragon, though a kind of mechanical, a dragon human cyborg of a kind. Effectively then, the two beings, the dragon and myself, co-piloted this same cyborg hybrid body type, and presented would be the equivalent of two individuals driving in the same car, and indeed were we able to telepathically communicate with each other. Impressions had already determined that his intent was not malign or destructive, and he would confirm this by revealing that he had been seeking me specifically, compelled and driven to doing so, though not understanding as to why. Still sharing this same hybrid mechanical form, we would take to the air, the body type capable of flight, despite no apparent means or mechanism of elevation, and we would exit the yoga room as the other students watched our departure. The scene would fade, and now I would find myself stationed in the streets of my UK physical level position, now having disassociated from the hybrid form as shared by myself and the dragon, and where we were once again as two distinct and separate body types. I would be again as my physical level human form, as I had operated as in the yoga class, the other being, although still rather reptilian in appearance, was more bipedal, two-legged, as opposed to the quadrupedal dragon he had previously been. And indeed, as the moments passed, he would progressively shed any indication of himself as quite clearly being reptilian, and adopt a more human exterior form, as though to blend in and go about his business unnoticed, as the streets we were in were bustling with an array of human participants. Impressions revealed he was a reptilian individual who had developed his consciousness that effected was a body form with extraordinary capability. He was another of what I may describe as one harbouring extreme levels of creational manipulating ability. He could literally bend the simulation to his wants, a consciousness design that wasn't in any way limited. As such, he could potentially present as a formidable foe or a tremendous asset. He was completely personal self-absorbed. He had no realization of the actuality of his real awareness or the isness it was a part of, but despite him being a reptilian, he was not associated in any way with the dark forces. They were aware of him, but rather left him to his own devices, neither soliciting his services or attempting his elimination. He simply found ways of amusing himself in creation, but in ways that were not abrasive or destructive, rather a rarity to be sure, as generally those who develop themselves as he has tend to abuse their abilities. As I mentioned, he had received as though a yearning to seek me out, a drive that couldn't be disregarded seemingly, and although the source of which was never revealed, this presented as an opportunity. For as I said, potentially this gifted, creationally powerful reptilian could present as a valuable asset. I asked him as to his name, but he lacked such, responding as to how he didn't see the need to apply a label to himself. I enquired then as to if he was a body type unique unto himself, or was a part of a species of reptilian, but seemingly he refused to provide an answer. According to him, to ask such was rude, and so I would apologize and we would move on. As I said, opportunity was knocking, and so, as is our primary objective, I presented him with the references pertaining to the true reality, the new sound connection, the real guides, the real purpose of recognizing the all is, etc. But he seemed disinterested, and rather scoffed at what I was conveying, so enamoured and immersed was he in his personal self. I did, however, speak of the global projects as being orchestrated by DUANE, of potentially assisting the Earth, and this he did seem interested in, as he was aware of the Earth being taken ever more so to the brink of destruction, and he was a being that delighted in the natural environment, and was willing to extend his services where the restoration of a planet to its former glory was concerned. He was agreeable then to bring his considerable unlimited ability to bear in regards to the projects, and wanted to meet DUANE personally on the physical level. I would inform the reptilian as to DUANE's current location, that of Mexico, and he suggested we could reformulate again as the singular dragon human cyborg body type and fly over there, and where undoubtedly he would be instrumental in regards to the projects. This was probably the reason as to the reptilian being compelled to find me, that he could be an assist where the projects were concerned, very likely a motivational drive implanted by a real guide. In the meantime, I would afford him a tour of my streets, and as he enquired as to where my house resided, so I would agree to take him there. He would manifest a car as though from the very ethos, and proceed to drive at a breakneck speed through the streets. I would inform him as to the restrictions imposed by the controllers and enforced by the police, the speed limits that were in place, but it was as though he couldn't care less, and indeed would accelerate even faster by several parked, though occupied police vehicles, and extend his tongue in their direction, an amusingly human gesture of contempt to the authorities. Interestingly, I would take him to my house, and where it should have been, so another building was in its place, and on entry, so the occupants, an older man and woman, would assure me that this wasn't my home, as I revealed to them my house number, and according to them such a number didn't exist, as though absent from the street. As the recreated physical level houses represent the consciousness on the real side, anything that befalls our houses indicates alterations or adjustments to the consciousness, generally that we derive a benefit awareness speaking, if indeed we have set intent and focus with the ears. That as it is the consciousness we seek to remove attachment from, the ideas that make up its construct, would not a consciousness representing house, no longer present, represent my having taken a substantial step in that direction? Very possibly. We still require the personal self-consciousness, as these are the mechanics that afford us our all-is recognizing comparisons, and invariably the house will feature in my future real-side experiences to assist in the expressing of certain ideas, but this did appear to be the situation in the context of this experience. Or perhaps that as we allow individuals into our consciousness homes on the real side, symbolically this represents our extending agreement to them, and maybe openly and wholeheartedly agreeing with another who is a personal self immersed, even if sincere and honourable at the moment of our encountering them, is not the most prudent of ideas. That I was content to do just this, but the possibility of, as though a guide, removing my ability to find my house and allow the reptilian inside, as the guides will watch over our activities, step in and intercede where necessary. The guides, able to read every individual, that although, as I mentioned, the gifted reptilian harboured no malice or inclination to be deceptive, intent can change, and the guides will weigh the probabilities and act accordingly. Unable to invite him into a house that no longer seemed to exist, at least perhaps for that moment, we would proceed to explore further streets of my neighbourhood. At one point, however, the reptilian would be struck as though by a debilitating sickness, for indeed a curious van had pulled up alongside where we were positioned. A gangly human with long hair had emerged from it and had opened the back, where revealed was an array of sophisticated technology, and whatever disharmonious frequencies were being emitted was having adverse impact on the reptilian. Either accidental, that ignorant was the long-haired human as to the effects of the distorted frequencies his technologies produced, along the lines of perhaps 5G, etc., or maybe this was a deliberate assault on my newly acquired reptilian ally. I mentioned that the dark forces were unconcerned as to the gifted reptilian, for up until now he had simply been amusing himself in creation, but with him now deciding to assist DUANE with the projects, it's conceivable the dark forces now had decided to interfere and attempt to remove the reptilian from being able to extend his abilities that would benefit the Earth, and also therefore undermine the controller's agendas for humanity. The frequencies transmitted from the van's technologies would not only cause a sickness with the reptilian, but distort his body form, that he began to shrink in size, becoming ever more diminutive, and transition from the human body type he was operating as, to one shriveled and as though comprising of wood, appearance-wise. I was reminded of the UK adverts promoting a pepper army, where an animated depiction of the food item with appendages and a face is utilised, as the reptilian now somewhat resembled this. I would carefully lift him from where he lay, as he now was but a foot in height and weighed very little, and carry him from the proximity of the van. This was enough seemingly that the harmful effects of the technologies could be reversed, and gradually the reptilian, who had been prone and lifeless, was restored and became animated once again, slowly returning to his original size, though as his actual reptilian form, absent of the human outer guise he had adopted. During his recovery there had been present a rather curious cat, that impression suggested was drawn to want to attack the reptilian while he was relatively defenceless, and necessary was it for me to repel and shoo it away that it was unable to carry out its intentions. A possible agent taking advantage of the reptilian's debilitated state perhaps, for when operating on all cylinders, the reptilian was very formidable as I mentioned. There the experience would end. Overall, I had secured the services of a new and very capable ally, one who, although had no interest in his real awareness, at least at that moment, was agreeable to assist with the projects, and considering how swift the dark forces were to involve themselves, if indeed what had transpired was an attack on their part, suggests they at least consider him a serious threat to the maintenance of their control systems, and it remains to be seen what develops from this.